Hello, everyone. Welcome to Liam's Lyceum. I'm your host, Liam, aka Himbar, and today I am doing my weekly update. This is the update for the 4th of November, 2023. It's November already, which is crazy. Almost 2024. Time flies. It's Liam's Leapings number 62. I realize I also need to change my background from my Fritz Leiber video I did on, it came out Wednesday. So I hope anyone who has not watched that, you don't have to go and watch it, obviously. It's up to you. But for those who haven't read anything by Fritz Leiber, or read very little, or maybe interested in reading something of his, then you might want to go watch it. I basically just give you recommendations of what to read by him, whether it be fantasy, sci-fi, or horror. So Fritz Leiber is a favorite author of mine, so I had a lot of fun recording that one. So yeah. Anyways, the idea is to get him more popular on BookTube of sorts, right? Since like no one else really talks about him, at least in the circle I'm really in. And there's occasionally people, I guess, like Raph, and then Matt has read Leiber. There's some people that have read Leiber but don't actively read it. I guess I get Tony from Near Night Adventure did read the big time right around the time I did. So kind of read that together, I guess. So yeah, anyways, do yourself a favor because it's good stuff. So anyways, there should be something for everyone, I'd imagine, as well. So this week, though, I'm going to go over real quick the stuff I read. I don't have a physical copy of... Let's see my novels first. I am still in the middle of Bloodstone by Carl Edward Wagner. I had hoped to have this finished by this week, but this happened the last time I was reading my last physical book I was reading, and where I read like a decent chunk, maybe the last couple days before I recorded this video, and then the next week I just didn't have time for whatever reason. So I've read very little of Kane this week, but I'm really enjoying it. It's not my favorite, but it is very interesting. Kane is essentially the antagonist of the book. And also for anyone listening that may want to read Kane, Carl Edward Wagner's Kane in particular, is it right now? It feels very much like a go-between between Robert E. Howard's Conan and David Gemmel's like Dress or something like that, right? It feels very like in the middle of that, right? Because I feel like something like Legend is very close to Sword and Sorcery. Depending on who asks, some might say it is. In some ways, it doesn't feel quite there, though. It doesn't have the same vibe to me, though it is still very good. So I just call it heroic fantasy, I guess. But Bloodstone is definitely Sword and Sorcery, and I don't know, it seems kind of like in the middle there. Except for, of course, Kane is the bad guy, and Conan's not, and neither is Dress by any means. So I'm still in the middle of that one. The other one I'm in the middle of, actually, I started this week, is Occult Detective Magazine number 10. The one of the editors there sent me a copy of it after they saw my review for New Edge Sword and Sorcery issue 1. Issue 2 review just came out this week, and so I was like, sure, I'll check it out. Not something I read much of. I'm sure I've read some of it. My tendency is they tend to seem to be, at least so far, the two stories I've read in this, to be contemporary, which means right now, right? And the stuff I've read is older, and so it almost seems like a period or historical fiction piece because I'm reading it so long after, right? But there's like a little story in Half Human Heroes. I think it's the P.M. Brown one that kind of reminds me that maybe that could fit in like a cult detective magazine, something like that at least. So those are the two I'm in the middle of. I'm actually, I guess, the other thing I'm in the middle of, which segues into one of the books I read this week, or what I'm counting as a book read, The Big Book of Cyberpunk. I have 2 stories left in part 2. I'm talking to Tim Monday. That should be my Wednesday videos next week. Part 2 is Society, if I remember correctly. A little different, less sexual than part 1. So if you didn't enjoy part 1 because of all that, then you might be interested in part 2 at least. Anyways, one of the stories actually in here, and so I'm going to put on my thumbnail. I'll probably do a separate review for it as well. There's a couple novellas that have been in here, right? Let me look at their names because some of them are kind of long. The Girl Who Was Plugged In by James Tiptree Jr. I didn't make any notes to do a review on that, but it is a novella. I sometimes review novellas. I mostly review novels and like anthologies, not really collections much. But and then Time Considered as a Helix of Semi-Precious Stones by Samuel R. Delaney, also a novella. I don't know if I'll review that one though either. But this one is also a novella. It's longer than the other two, I believe. And it is, I Can Transform You by Maurice Broadus. I don't know how to say his name. Broadus. I just kind of guess if he's American or something like that. So, and I liked it. I Can Transform You a lot. I'll talk about it more when I talk to Tim about this book. But the title I Can Transform You is a little interesting though, because I have a hard time like seeing it in some ways. Though the way the Earth is transformed in this novel, it's got a good. It's like cyberpunk, but it's got aliens, which you don't get a lot of, I feel like, in cyberpunk. So it's pretty interesting. And then I also, let's see, one of the books I finished, which I do not have physically, is A Night in the Lonesome October by Roger Zelazny. I finished it on Halloween. Surprise. And this was fine. It's very much like kind of gothic, if you like gothic literature, if you like Lovecraftian literature. It's almost a Cthulhu mythos story, actually. It's just got a bunch of references to that. I didn't think it was great. In fact, it's probably my least favorite Zelazny I've read. But that being said, I've read his first 5 Amber books and Road Marks, which are all great. And so it's not bad. Yeah. I don't know if I cared much for the narrative being from the point of view of a dog. All right. And then you have some chapters which are tiny and some chapters which are much, much bigger in comparison. So, though not huge, really, the book is small still. So yeah, Night in Lonesome October. I'll probably have a review up for that, but several months from now, where it's not even close to Halloween, and you're not thinking about it at all. Yeah, and then the last 2 I finished since I read or finished I Can Transform You and Night in Lonesome October was The Hand of Chaos. I actually finished Night in Lonesome October, I Can Transform You, and The Hand of Chaos all on Halloween, which is just funny. The Hand of Chaos is book 5 in Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's Deathgate cycle. It's kind of like the beginning of the end, because the first 4 books very much sets up like the worlds and kind of what's going on, and this kind of gets the ball rolling more. And this takes place on Arianus for the most part, which is where book 1 takes place, which is cool because as far as like the worlds themselves are of varying interests, right? I think they're all pretty cool, honestly, all 4 of the realms, whatever. But or worlds, I guess. Yeah, whatever you would call them. But Arianus seemed like it was the most fleshed out, personally. I mean, I could just be misremembering that, but so it's cool to be back on Arianus. And the second book, the 6th book, is about the same length as this, which is not very long. What? Yeah, a little over 400 pages. But the last book is actually the shortest, I think, in the whole series. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll get to those sooner rather than later. It's nice to be 5 out of 7 books through now. Means I only have 2 more left. I have also 2 more left in Rune Lords, so I've kind of just been trying to knock some series out, and those 2 are ones that we're getting focused on, because they're enjoyable enough to deserve the focus. While something like Shannara, which I was trying to get through the Heritage of Shannara, and then was like, this is kind of boring, so I'm like halfway through with that, and there's only 4 books in that series. And then Malazan is just heavy, and so I've had a break from it for a few months, so maybe I'll get back to that soon. But I started Malazan about 2 years ago now. So, and then the 4th and final book I finished this week, finished this today, was The Desert of Souls by Howard Andrew Jones, and this is really fun. It's kind of Prince of Persia like. You could say like a little bit like the first Assassin's Creed or that new one, Mirage, I think, that came out, but it's not really about assassins. In fact, it's sword and sorcery, kind of sword and sandal feel, because it's historical sword and sorcery, which you don't get a bunch of either. Most sword and sorcery secondary world. And it's in 9th century, I think. Could be one of those other centuries around there. Baghdad. So it's pretty cool. We have our main character, the narrator, is actually Asim, who is the guard captain for this guy named Jafar, who is important in Baghdad and in the Caliphate. And then you have Dabir, who's a scholar. He's a lot more meticulous in stuff. And then, yeah. So it's very interesting. The Desert of Souls, like that actual place, is very cosmic, actually, and it's really cool. Like, it kind of starts off mundane. I mean, there's some intrigue and stuff going on, and then you get hints of like, ooh, there's something interesting going on here, and it becomes interesting and then weird and then cosmic, and it's really cool. And it's really short, as fantasy often should be and isn't. Not to say that I haven't enjoyed big books, because I've enjoyed plenty, but uh, Jones is an expert. This is my sixth novel I've read by Jones. I'm looking forward to. I think there's one other novel in the series. There's a couple short stories, or maybe like there's a digital only one. I'm forgetting what it's called. But I think that takes place after this one. And then there's another novel, I think. I think it's only one other novel called The Bones of the Old Ones, which is super awesome. Has another cool cover like this, but I think normally when I look up this book, it doesn't have this cool cover. You get this really lame cover that were kind of popular a little over a decade ago into like the aughts. But this book came out in 2011, I think. So again, yeah, just really cool stuff. Honestly, Jones is great. I enjoy him. The more I read from him, the more I enjoy him. So yeah, it's got Glenn Cook liked it. James Inga, Mont Cook, William King, Nathan Long, Ellie Modisette Jr., E. E. Knight, Richard A. Knack, Kevin J. Anderson, Stephen Brust. I mean, so I enjoyed it too. I'm not as important as any of those guys probably, but I enjoyed it too. So that review will come out 4 months from now, because that's. I realized today actually that I had missed a review too. The beginning of October, I should have had a review for The Kingless Land by Ed Greenwood, and I didn't have it on my list for some reason. I realized that. I was like, wait a second, I read that book, because I was sitting there. I'm thinking, I like to read books every once in a while from like Michael Moorcock and Fritz Leiber and Greenwood and whoever, right? The authors I like. And I was like, it's been a minute since I've read Greenwood. And I was like, wait, the last one I read, I should have reviewed that by now, right? And I should have, and I just spaced it somehow. I also need to read another Moorcock book. I've read some of his short stories, but it's been since about March, I think, since I read a novel by him. So, but anyways, those are those are the books I read, novella and novels. I did read a decent amount of short stories, so let me go through those quickly. I read The Mind Spider by Fritz Leiber, which I won't bore you here, but it's essentially a pastiche, not an explicit pastiche of At Mounds of Madness. It's better than At Mounds of Madness, because it's way, 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 way shorter, but it's very fun, set in the future, has telepathy, ray guns, and stuff like that. So very fun. And the other things, actually, I read two other stories by Leiber besides it. So I read 5 by Leiber this week. Surprise. But I read To Arkham in the Stars, and this is for class, that I read that, and that is like an explicit Cthulhu mythos, story, which is very fun, and it works because it's so short. And then the other one is The Horror from the Depths. They both kind of deal with Lovecraft's death, which is interesting. But they both work, but they're very much in the voice of Lovecraft. I'm pretty impressed with how much Leiber is able to make it so boring in a way. Like, okay, like when I read Lovecraft, he's kind of stiff for me. I mean, there's some good stuff, and I want to talk about that in a minute, because I read some Lovecraft this week too. But Leiber is very full of life, and he's very fun, and he's just got this awesome imagination, and it can get dark, but he does it in just a very different way than Lovecraft. But also I was very surprised when I was reading The Arkham in the Stars and The Horror from the Depths that he imitates Lovecraft very well. Like they almost read like Lovecraft stories. Besides that, Lovecraft would not write these stories, because The Arkham in the Stars, so short, is essentially saying like the day before. It's about a character going to Arkham, and who's going to the stars? Lovecraft is. I think it's like the Migo in what is that one story? The Whisper in Darkness, right? They can take your brain and take you to the stars. You'll live forever, type of thing. It's essentially insinuating that that's what happened to Lovecraft on like March 14th, 1937, the day before he died. So, which is interesting. And then also Lovecraft is a character mentioned who dies. He's not ever like actually in the story in the Horror from the Depths. And the Horror from the Depths is something I thought would be like from the sea, but no, it's underground, which is interesting, right? Like there's these horrors chewing through the stones underground, and like people falling into holes and stuff like that. It's kind of creepy, but it's very much in the Lovecraft vein of creepy, which is to say, I don't think it's as effective. I think it would have been more effective if Leiber just told it in his own style. The other ones I read from, speaking of, from Liber are I'm Looking for Jeff, which is a horror story about a ghost who has been. It's pretty obvious from the beginning, but it's still very gripping. That she's been murdered, and she only shows herself to like one guy, so they think this old guy Pops is crazy essentially, and so like she kind of gets her revenge though. Vengeful ghost story. And then the eeriest ruined Dawn world is interesting because it's again kind of a horror story, but not at the same time. It's about aliens just sitting around saying, "Oh yeah, we were off exploring the wild planets over here or whatever," and they're talking about Earth, right? They don't call it Earth, they call it Dawn world because they hadn't gotten to space yet. But no one's alive on Earth, right? The ice caps melted. They find one living person, and I guess is mended to a machine, which they think is an abomination, which comes off as very much a Sun Eater thing. I shared like the little quote that was most pertinent in the Sun Eater Discord when I read that. I was like, that's something that Christopher would write. But it was very, very intriguing story. I can't remember when it came out, but I feel like it was pretty early. And it just, I don't know, it just showcased Liber's like knack. And I don't know why, because he reads very modern. I don't know why he's not as popular, as he was. Anyways, I'm taking too long. I had more to say, so I'll try to be quick about this. But I also read Trigon by Jason Ray Carney, which is the second story in Rakefire and Other Stories. This one's pretty interesting because I was reading it and I was like, this is like not very normal from what you assume of Sword and Sorcery, because our main character is kind of a wimp. And not because he's like more wimpy than anyone else, but more because he's seen the horrors of war, and it's not very nice, it's not very pretty. And it's about like very dedicated, it's got gods involved, and like curiosity killed the cat, like type of sorcery, everything, not like super evil, but like just gotta like in over their head type of sorcery, which is very interesting. And Carney has a great style. I love his style. It just feels very eldritch at times, but other times it just feels like it's not something anyone else would write. It's just something Carney would write. And Carney as a person's cool as well, awesome as well, obviously. But the stories are really good. I always love. I don't think I have read a Carney story and think, oh, that's a little disappointing, or something like that. He's definitely worth your time. And then last three stories, I'll just mention these quickly. The Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft, which is probably one of my favorite Lovecraft stories, along with The Color Out of Space. I just really dig the ending of it. It's got a lot more action in it, too. But yeah, it's similar. If for those unaware with The Shadow over Innsmouth, it's kind of similar to like Kafka's Metamorphosis. And then The Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft, which is, I assume, where the Witch House magazine, amateur cosmic horror magazine, gets its name from. Interesting one about dreams. Not my favorite, but is not a bad one. And then The Thing on the Roof by Robert Howard is the first time I've read a Robert Howard horror story. It's actually read by Britton from the Okie Dude. Is that what his channel's name is? I actually spoke with Britton on Sunday, so I should have a video. That video of me speaking with him should go up sometime. But yeah, The Thing on the Roof. I've heard good things about Howard's horror, but it was good, and it wasn't very long either. So, other things I did this week. I wrote a story, Rise and Fall. I talked about this one. I submitted it to Parallel Universe Publications, Swords and Sorceries, Tales of Heroic Fantasy, Volume 7. I submitted that. It got rejected already, so it's funny. I finished the story, sent it in, and it got rejected all the time since I made my last update here. And yeah, it's a fun story. It's definitely different than a lot of the things I write. I've been trying lately in a lot of ways. Sometimes I go very heavily stylized, and other times I'm not. I've written like cozy fantasy. I try to be able to. I want to be able to be flexible, if that makes sense. Like most of my stories I come back with rejections. I got a lot of rejections actually this week. Other ones are just stories I wrote before, and I'm just trying to get them published still. But maybe someone will want them eventually. So, but yeah, this story, Rise and Fall. I thought it was a different Sword and Sorcery story that I enjoyed writing. So I did send it back out already. Another thing I need to write more. It's NaNoWriMo. I haven't written anything in November because I finished the story on the 30th actually. So, and there's lots of places open right now, actually. So I submitted a story to Hexagon, Podcastle's open, Die by the Sword from DMR Books is open. So yeah, anyways, Old Moon Quarterly is doing their Kickstarter right now. They're not open for submissions. They open up in January, I think. I don't have any clue what I'm going to submit this time, but I also sent stuff to Crimson Quill Quarterly as well. They are open they were open for the first time. Yeah, Old Moon's very much worth your checking out, giving them some money, if you have money to give. I haven't donated to Kickstarter because I don't have money to give right now, which brings me to my other topics this week, which I don't want to bother people with this because I mostly focus on the books, right? But I wanted to give you guys like heads up on kind of what's going on in life, right? I told you last week, so I a couple weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago now, I got a job, right? And I was supposed to come in for orientation on Monday. I get there on Monday. I wait around for half an hour, and they finally come and talk to me, and they say they don't have a job for me. And I was like, wow. And so that like ruined my day, essentially, And I was like, because, I haven't had a job. Well, I have a job, right? It's very much a part-time job, though. I don't make enough money to survive. And my bank account has dwindled to the point where it's essentially empty, to be honest, right? So like I've been stressed out about it for months, but like now I'm to the point where like I'm screwed if I don't get a job now, right? And it's not like I haven't been applying for places I don't want to work. Like I've been applying everywhere. I've applied for hundreds of jobs, and for some reason I never got a job offer except for that one. And then when of course I show up and they're like, "Never mind, you don't have one." I'm like, "Wow, thanks." Honestly, can't say I'm surprised. Like I just feel like I keep on getting screwed over here. Nice thing is that I got another job offer. I start Monday. Hopefully, I don't show up Monday and they say never mind, because that would be very bad. And yeah, so the money wasn't as nice as this one as that one that should have been, but it's still some money. Hopefully, I can pay rent next month, which is stressful because I have my final for class coming up just a couple weeks. I have this big paper to write. I've written very, very little. The baby is due at any point, really now, since we're in November. Which is exciting though, right? I mean, like, I've been. It's funny. I used to watch this guy on YouTube a lot, Boogie2988, and he's very controversial these days, and he's always had kind of an odd sense of humor. But when I was younger, and I mean, like, I probably started watching when I was like 13 or something. I liked his content because I was really into video games, and so was he. But he also had a tendency to be very positive, okay, even when life was trying to beat you down. And so I can appreciate that, right? Like I am very blessed. I mean, there's people watching me ramble right now, right? Whoever you are, weirdos, why are you listening to me? No, I'm joking. And I have all these books behind me. I mean, I have this crib over here for the baby when he's born, and yeah, I mean, I had biscuits and gravy for dinner. I love biscuits and gravy, and it was delicious. I got to play Lotro with my brother a couple times, I think, since I recorded one of these. So, and I finished a book, actually. Speaking of baby, I finished another book. I'm just not going to talk about it on here, about, birth, essentially, that I was reading. So, and then another, like, I guess, last piece of thing I will say here, because this is too long, but kind of exciting news. Back in August, July, September, maybe? No, probably July. LTUE, which is Life, the Universe, and Everything's conference they hold every year. It's an academic conference, technically, but it's specifically writing and reading. They have it in Utah. It's their 42nd year in February, which is cool. I went last year, or this year, I guess. I went to the last one, this last February, and it was very fun. But I went just as, like as a person coming to. I have people that I'm buddies with there, right, that are like actually on the panels. That was like that one weird moment where I like raised my hand and acted like I was on the panel at one point, even though I was not, because I wanted to give the answer, essentially, because the people on the panel didn't give bad answers, but I was like, I can give a better answer. Let me represent Sword and Sorcery real quick. No, but that conference, I proposed a presentation mostly based off what Dave Butler said I should do. I proposed a presentation and it got approved. So I'm going to LTE as a guest to give a presentation, which is terrifying, but awesome at the same time. Especially since it's an academic conference. All right, that's cool. it's a good like badge I can give myself or something afterwards. So and part of me feels after I got that accepted, I was like, oh, I should have proposed more panels, like doing like booktube or book talk. I don't do any book talk, right? But that would have been relative. And then, or like, what is sword and sorcery? There was no sword and sorcery panel last I checked. So I should have done that, but I didn't. So I'm doing a presentation. It's going to be on philology, actually. I titled it What Did Tolkien Know? An Introduction to Philology, which, that's how you get people to come, of course. So it's going to be really similar to the video I did actually earlier this year, which is very similar titled as well, which is an introduction to philology, a little of what Tolkien knew, I think is what I titled it, which itself was just a rehash of a presentation I gave at the Humanities Society at the local university earlier this year. I'm going to modify it, of course, since this is a writing conference, but it'll be largely the same because I'm pretty satisfied with that presentation. Now, if anyone has feedback on that presentation, I haven't gotten any, right? But if anyone has some that you think would be useful, I'm going to incorporate Tolkien a bit more and just focus a little bit more on like how you can use it in your writing rather than just what it is. Now, mostly the focus is what it is, because if I don't focus on what is philology, then it's not as important, right? But if I focus on what this is and then potentially how you can use it, like let's see how Tolkien used it, but also other ways, like you don't have to be a philologist, to know some like do this, type of things, but that's kind of philology in a degree. So, yeah, anyways, sorry, this went way longer than I thought than I wanted it to, but I did put a bunch of stuff to talk about, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised with myself. But no, yeah, I'm very blessed. So thanks to everyone who watches. I appreciate it. This is not something I ever thought I would do. Just trying to like kind of fill my niche, however the heck you want to say that. Actually, I would say that both are correct. But this is Liam from Liam's Last Name. Let me know what y'all have been up to this past week. So